and I am the field training coordinator from the Kentucky Autism Training Center that will be sharing this information with you today. By the end of this presentation, the goal is for you to be able to explain the why, when, and how of using visual supports. You'll be able to describe different types of visual supports and also be able to design a visual support that will meet the needs of your child or children. Before we get started with the presentation, I just want to make sure that all of you have access to the resources that I will be referring to. Within this resource folder that you see on this slide, you will also have access to the PDF of this PowerPoint presentation. So please take a moment right now and either be able to copy down the bit.ly URL that you see on your screen, or if you have your phone handy or another device that has a camera on it, go ahead and scan that QR code that you see there, and you'll have access to the resource folder. You'll want to save this resource folder for later so that you can find it easier. Also on this slide, you'll see that we have information about the Kentucky Autism Training Center. So if you haven't heard of us, we are a state-funded agency that covers the whole state of Kentucky. And our whole mission is to be able to provide resources to family members, guardians like yourself, for children and individuals with autism from 0 to 99. Also, we support the schools and community members that may want more information on how to support autistic individuals within their settings. So if you have any questions or you want to just learn more about us, please feel free to use that website, www.kentuckyautism.org, to be able to explore the different resources that we have. If you are watching this and you do not live in the state of Kentucky, there are still resources on there that you may be able to use on a national level, which then means on a local level for you. All right, let's start with the why. Well, as you look at this slide, look at the different clouds on here and ask yourself, does your child or your children have demonstrate any of these behaviors? Do they always need to know what's next, what's happening next? Do they need directions repeated over and over again? Are they always late? Do they not follow directions or instructions? Do they experience meltdowns with transition? Are they easily fatigued or overwhelmed? Are they irritated by change, which may go with those transitions? And do they interrupt? Maybe not even constantly and all the time, but definitely during certain periods of time throughout the day or during different activities. Well, if you said yes or if you said yes to any of these, then this presentation is for you. Visual supports are considered a bridge to understanding. So if any of those behaviors are occurring with your children and you're just thinking, what else can I do? Do they not hear me? Do they not understand me? Are they not paying attention? Are they ignoring me? Like, what is going on? Why are they doing any of these behaviors? Well, a lot of that has to do with auditory processing. Okay, it also can do with just a challenging time and not understanding, even if they do understand you in the moment, like they understand the words that you're saying, but not understanding how that leads to the next activity, or they're distracted as they're listening to you, so they're not able to really process the information that you're saying. So if you have experienced any of those behaviors that were listed on the last slide, and I'll show those again so you can look over those, then this may tell you this is a big cue that you may need to use some type of visual support with your child. Reason being is that they bridge that understanding of verbal language to more concrete visual language. Just think about it. When you have something written down, when you're looking at something, it doesn't change, right? Tone of voice doesn't affect it. It when you read it, it reads the same way every single time, no matter how many times you read it, because you have to make the effort to write it down and be able to describe it in words. Usually you have to place the person who's designing the visual support needs to put it into more concrete, concise terms. So it's not lost on any type of symbolism, or the words don't change depending on the person. So having a visual support with information provides really concrete, consistent language to the expectations that are being expected to be completed, or um, or if it's a schedule or instructions, that next thing is not going to change. And if it is, then it'll be changed on the visual support. So I think you know where I'm going here. So you probably read the slide, okay? And so it does have a lot to do with auditory processing. It doesn't mean that the student always will have challenges with auditory processing. And I say, I'm sorry, I say students, you'll hear me say students because I work in the schools a lot. Um, you won't always, you don't have to put a stamp on the child saying, oh, they have poor auditory processing. And that may not be the case all the time, but it's definitely the case in those instances where they're just not comprehending the information that is being said to them. It could just be, again, like I mentioned, it could just be distractions in the environment. It could be on times or days that they're tired. Maybe they don't sleep well at night. Maybe they have really bad allergies in the morning. Maybe it's right after lunch when they get that lull, that sleepiness, because of lack of sleep. I mean, there's a lot of different things that could be going on depending on the age, endurance, and being able to be at an activity for a certain period of time, the motivation to be at the activity, the setting, what's going on, what's distracting in the environment. So all of that will can cause auditory processing to decrease in the moment. And then that ends up resulting in them not following instructions, not understanding what the expectations are, getting frustrated when something changes because they didn't remember or didn't even hear it the first time when it was told to them. So again, these are times, so just don't think of visual supports are needed for everything. It's during those times when it's the students are having a really challenging time. And usually that's going to cause some anxiety, which, all of us can relate. When you start to become anxious in a situation for any reason, it doesn't have to do with not knowing what's expected, but just for any reason at all, that's when language skills, both being able to speak and also being able to understand what's being told to you, go right out the door. So that's where visual supports can become very handy. All right. And they're very practical. We all use them. We all need visual supports. They're a life skill. Okay. In general, for those of you who use calendars, I know I rely on my my virtual calendar on my phone or on the computer to let me know when I need to be at certain appointments. Some of you may use a paper calendar, in which if it's not written down on that calendar, if it's a wall calendar or even a paper calendar that carry around with you, a book, then if it's not written down, you probably will not remember. Okay, so those are all examples of types of visual support. So obviously that increases independence, something we use every day, all day long. It could be very simple. It could be those sticky notes that you put up on your mirror if it's at home, or up on your computer screen just to remind you about certain things to do, or the steps that you need to do in order to access certain websites, passwords. A lot of people I know have password keys. Right? So all those little cue cards to remind us about the little details in life that maybe we don't use all the time, those are all considered visual supports. And so obviously they are used in all visual settings. And you can see there's an even example of YouTube, because it's pretty common now these days that when we don't know how to do something, we usually look on YouTube to see if there's a video about it. And that is considered a visual support. So here's some of the things that I mentioned, right? The calendars, our phones. Oh my gosh, those are huge visual supports. All those little icons are all cues for different apps, right? That have different functions. The signs on bathroom doors. When you travel, all those signs, especially if you travel into countries where you don't know the language, right? A lot of those are just pictures so that they're international. The pictures, whether it's for the bathroom or the stop sign or, go right or left or whatever it is. Recipes, a lot of times they'll have a picture of what the outcome of the recipe should be. Those are all visual supports. So visual supports are part of everybody's life. Just some of the visual supports that our children need are not ones that we need, right? Or needed when we were kids. So we may not think about providing it for them, but they need them. And they may fade out of, they may not need all the time, like the steps of how to do something, right? They may not need to look at that all the time. They'll probably memorize it the more they do it, just like for us when we first learn to do something. But then there's others that they may need in one form or another for the rest of their lives, just like we do. So we're going to talk more about that and what type of visual supports to use for what, and what that may look like, and how, what factors to think of so that they're as effective as possible. And why use visual supports? Because, it does take a little bit of time on our part. I think now that you've thought about it for yourself, you probably know, right? If you have something to look at while you're completing something that is new to you or you're not sure about, it's going to take less energy because you don't have to try to figure it out and get frustrated. And also success, because you'll probably complete it because you have the instructions on how to do it. So remember how one of those behaviors was just a child that may be get tired very easily, because maybe they're constantly trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing. And that is very exhausting, both just taking a lot more energy to, put context clues together and asking questions, and also frustrating if they can't figure it out. So, and they're trying to stay calm and stay within the moment, but can be very, very, very frustrating. So it's exhausting at the same time. So it takes less energy, decreases frustration and unwanted behaviors, which we kind of said, helps focus on key ideas. So we talked about distractions, right? If you have a child, especially a younger child, that gets easily distracted just because they're new to the environment. Maybe they just have a hard time filtering out certain input, loud sounds, other people walking in and out of the room, the TV on, the radio on, the list goes down. I think if I say distraction, you could probably think of lists of them. Then it may be hard for them to focus on exactly what they're supposed to be doing, or the steps, or whatever it is that you're trying to ask them to do. By providing them with a visual support, just especially if they're readers, of course, just putting the words of the steps, or what you're expecting of them, or focus on what they're supposed to be doing right now, or what the outcome, what they're working towards. That will help them stay focused, because now they don't have to listen to the sounds. They can just look at one thing, and that can help keep their mind focused. I guess that makes sense. The next one makes sense. So increases on-task behavior, which in another way increases engagement. So they're able to stay engaged longer and easier if you have some cue cards to remind them, either what the outcome will be, or the steps, or how to be successful. A lot of times at the beginning, reinforcement will come into it, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But once they get the idea of how visual supports can help them, It will help them become more independent. They'll be more confident in completing tasks and being able to, if they're earning something for completing a challenging task or a non-desirable task, then they'll have confidence that they can get to it. Reduces anxiety because they know exactly what to do in order to get it done, to be successful. Adds structure, right? They know what they need to do in order to get either to accomplish something or to get to somewhere or to do something or what's coming next, depending if it's a schedule. And if they forget, it's because it's multiple steps or multiple things, they can always refer back to that visual support. Again, if you think about it, it's a lot of reasons why we use the visual supports in our days. Now, a lot of our work at Kentucky Autism Training Center is based off of a report that comes out every 4 years called the NCAEP report, which you probably guessed it is an acronym for an agency that one of its main jobs is to put together to review all the evidence-based practices that are used with autistic individuals or individuals with autism, and through research have been found to be effective through a very strict characteristics of the research that they're looking at. So it can't just be one-offs like, oh, somebody did, a study about how some practice is used and they said it worked well. Okay, great. We're going to put it on this list. So no, they look at all different types of research. They look at, see the age groups, how it was done, all those things. And if it passes all the criteria, then it ends up on this list. So at this point, there are 28 different evidence-based practices. As you look at the list, you probably recognize some that you use with your children: modeling, prompting, reinforcement, right? So some of them are just best practices in general for teaching. And you'll see that the last one that I have highlighted is visual supports. And pretty much visual supports is something that is part of almost every single evidence-based practice on this list. I placed this report into the resource folder that you had access to earlier, because especially if your children are diagnosed with autism, or if they're younger and you suspect that they have autism, this is a good report for you to have access to, because then you'll know what works. Okay. And you'll see that a lot of professionals will use these practices. So when they talk about them, you may be, you can be more familiar with them, or you can look it up. This is a very easy user-friendly report, describes it very well. It'll tell you what, which categories the research was in the sense of what age groups and what skills they were looking at. So really good to learn, put these evidence-based practices in your vocabulary when you're talking to teachers, therapists, anybody, any service provider that is going to be working with your child or children. And then also for you to, use them yourself, because they'll probably be using these terms when describing to you what you can do at home for the students to carry over from the therapy sessions. So just good vocabulary to have when learning how to teach and how to carry or follow through with any type of skills that are being taught. Okay, so what are visual supports? Well, I think I kind of started to lay the foundation for that, but let's break it down into 3 categories that are very easily understandable and very user-friendly, in the sense that you can see the practicality of them. And this information, the breaking down of 3, comes from a sister agency to the NCAEP. They're all out of UNC Chapel Hill, so University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And this agency, in fact, I think it's related to it. They do all the training based off of those 28 evidence-based practices. And so I'm going to show you the resource for where you can find trainings if you want to learn more about these, but it's called Affirm. And so they break down the information and they provide it in an easily understandable, practical way to be able to implement these each of the evidence-based practices. And so they break that visual supports into 3 categories. The first one is visual boundaries. So you can create visual supports in by using visual boundaries. And this is one that we have not mentioned. I have not mentioned, right? It was not pictured in anything that we were just talking about. So this can look like on a table or on the floor. Okay, it can look just taking painter's tape in different colors, if the colors represent something, to allow the child to know where exactly they need to work, where they need to eat, where, basically where the boundaries are, where they need to sit, what certain parts where they of the house or whichever setting they are that they are allowed to go into or they're not allowed to go into. That could be used by this. In this example, it's a tape, but you can also use furniture. You can use a rug. So anything that really makes clear boundaries of what it represents, like of being able to access it or not access it, where to do certain things. Again, you're going to need to teach this to your children, and that's where the reinforcement comes in, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But a lot of times when you try to have children sit somewhere or stay out of somewhere or stay within somewhere, and there isn't any clear physical boundaries to it, it's really confusing to them, because that becomes a very abstract idea. And what you are imagining, they may not necessarily understand, even if you, again, if it's all verbal and you're telling them, right? As soon as you mention it to them with your hands, like even if you describe it, that goes away. So if they were distracted while you're saying that, or, 5 minutes later, they got engaged in something, and then this is something that is new, they look up and they don't remember what those boundaries are. So again, just using furniture, tape, pictures, even a stop sign, a go sign, any of those may be helpful for the children to understand where they need to be. The next one is visual cues. Okay, and visual cues is a huge category. This one I did already mention. This is the one where, this is where you have your sticky notes as adults. We have sticky notes. We have those reminders that pop up on our phones or calendars. So visual cues are everywhere. They're in the environment, right? Those are the stop signs. Those are the stop lights. So all of those different things. So they can come in many different forms: objects, photographs, as you can see, drawings, picture symbols. So for non-readers or kids that are very young. Also, I'm going to show you a little bit later an autistic adult who uses visual cues, and she still uses pictures, even though she is very literate and eloquent in her writing and speaking. When it comes for using cues, pictures are still easier for her. And so, pictures are not necessarily for kids. It's whatever is going to help take that abstract idea and place it into a concrete form that has clear understanding, and when they look at it, there's no question what they need to do or what is expected or what's coming, whatever that message is. So you've had some time to take a look at some of the list of what is here. There's videos, right? So videos, that's a big one, and they're probably using that already. So some of the other things, there's the printer instructions, which, sometimes do or do not help. So that's always good to remember, right? Like what makes it very clear. Choice boards are big ones. Those are very easy to make. You see a very nicely organized one here, but I mean, choice boards, depending if the child, again, can read or not read, it may be you just taking a piece of paper or a sticky note and just drawing, 4 options, writing down the 4 options, or if you just have like a zippy bag of different pictures that represent different options, like they, for snacks or activities or anything that is, routine within the day. If you can provide the options in a picture form, that will be very motivating for the student if it's something they're working for, or if you're asking, what's the first thing you want to get done, if it's something that is flexible like that, it will help them understand what it is. Because when you ask that question, what do you want to do first? Woo! If you don't give options to that, that can be a bit overwhelming for the students. Now, again, for the children. So remember, if a child can answer that question easily, then this is obviously not a spot that they need a visual support for. But if the child gets upset and they can't even answer that question, and you're like, oh, guess you don't want to do anything. Okay, I've been guilty of that. That's why I know that. That's why I use that response. Or you think they don't have anything here that they want to do, and you're like, frantically trying to think of other options. That may not be it. It may be that is too overwhelming of a question. They're not sure what the options are, because the options could be anything. Okay. Even if you do the same thing in the same setting every single time, it may still be anything. So if you see the child is confused and they're getting upset, quickly write it down. If there are objects, put the objects in front of them, have them choose it really quick. Okay, so those are all ways of using visual cues to represent information, and that may be all the child needs. Okay. You see some SEL, social emotional, when I'm upset, what can I do? So it's kind of a different form. That can be like a to-do list, or it could be a choice board. But if you have a child who's, has some challenges with self-regulation, being able to calm themselves down, or can easily go into a meltdown mode, not tantrum, not talking tantrum. Tantrums when they can stop immediately and be fine as if nothing happened. So that's a behavior of communication. They're communicating they want something or want to get away from something. We're talking about like more of a physiological, where it's hard for them to calm down because they're getting overwhelmed by the environment, they're tired, the noises are too loud, and they need to be able to say, I need to calm down, or they need a little break from what they're doing. Then you may want to make a little choice board, to let them know what the options are right now, in that time. That, remember, you get to choose options. What are ways that they can try to calm themselves down before they get to meltdown mode? Because once you get to meltdown mode, or they get to meltdown mode, there's the point of no return. So yeah, if you want more ideas around that, talk to their teachers or therapists, because they probably have some ideas of how you can do that as well. I'm showing some examples too for, I mentioned younger kids, but of course this is across the age groups, and even for students who are, like we said, this is what we use too. So just make sure, again, if you have children who are in middle school or high school or adults, and again, they're experiencing any of those challenges that we saw at the beginning, start writing things down, start putting them into steps, start, create an organizational system for them. So sometimes executive functioning skills that help keep with, that help with organization, can go out the window again if they're distracted, if they're sick, if there's things in the environment that are overwhelming them. So many reasons. Place a sticky note. I love sticky notes. Sticky notes should be your best friend. When in doubt, write it down on the sticky note. Draw a really rudimentary picture. I'm all about stick figures. So write it down and just put it right in front of the individual. You don't need to say it, especially if they can read. Just point to it. You want to say it the first time, but then just keep pointing to it so that they can focus on it, and they can focus on what the key ideas are and what they need to be successfil. Here are some school related ones. So you may see this in their classrooms if they're school age. Ask teachers, ask therapists what visual supports they use at, in either their therapy or in at school that may be useful, that your child helps them to be successful, and how that may look in the home, because they'd be more than happy to help you translate that into the home. Okay, so we covered visual boundaries, okay, visual cues, and now the third category, is the one that people usually think about when they think of visual supports, and that is visual schedules. Again, remember, as I established at the beginning, we all use visual schedules. This is a life skill. It's just what they look like changes over time and how often we need it, right? If it's routine, we may not need it. We may not need it to know what to do the first thing in the morning, like some individuals may. Or we may, if we're trying to create a new habit, a lot of times we do use some type of visual schedule to remind us what our new healthy schedule may need to be, and before we memorize it and it turns into a habit. So as you can see, the slide is a cue to remind us that it can be used for environmental supports, groups, or individuals. So we put this because it can be used for for a whole classroom. So again, this is something that most classrooms use. So I would definitely talk to your students' teachers or therapists about this, because they're probably using some type of visual schedule. Visual schedules can look like to-do lists. Okay, so that can be just like a really a sticky note that you put just right next to them on the table or wherever they're, or on a clipboard or something like that, hang it up and just reminding them, go over it with them, to remind them what is expected, what's going to happen, and when some, what's going to happen during the day. And so if it's something like a preferred activity, they know what's going to happen before they get to that preferred activity. If it's a non-preferred activity, then you can show how afterwards, they get to do a preferred activity. And when I say non-preferred or preferred, hopefully you guys know that, and all of you know that it just means something that they want to do or don't want to do. So as you can see, it can be complex or simple depending on the student, and it can be as simple as writing it down on a piece of paper or creating something on a computer. So because there are so many different variations, there are some important components of visual schedules. Some basically some planning that you want to have before you make one, if you have the time to do this. Okay, it could just be you need to create one on the spur of the moment, but if you're finding that it's not being helpful with your children, or you've used them in the past and they don't really don't really get it, doesn't really help them to understand what's going on, just step back and just take a look at, think about these components. First of all, what is the form of them? Some kids that are just beginning, they're non-readers, they've never used anything like this. They may need objects on a schedule form, just putting the objects in the sequence of how how they're going to use them. The objects can be representative of an activity, okay, that it's associated with, and that can help the student or the child understand. Technology, that's where basically pictures on an iPad that you can create. There's a lot of apps with schedules for visual schedules that you can easily upload pictures, or they have pictures that you can use, and it will help, you can put the child, and when they click on it, it makes a sound or it says the word. So it can be very interactive. And that is a really important part of visual supports that I'm going to mention a little bit later, is that visual supports only work if they can be interacted with. So not only the adult teaching the child, going over the schedule with the child, but also that the child can interact with it as well. And we'll get more into that. Photographs or drawings. So, when they don't need objects, but the symbols that they have out there just don't really represent the activity or the object or whatever it is that you're placing on the schedule. It means nothing to them, basically. Then you may want to use photographs of either the area or something that's going to be meaningful for that. When the child looks at that picture, they know exactly what it means, as far as on a schedule, like what the activity is. And then, like I mentioned, words. If the individual uses words, then great. Like I mentioned, but I also mentioned earlier that there are some adults that still prefer pictures. So you just kind of have to figure that out. One of my informal tests, because I used to be a special education teacher, when I was creating visual supports for a student, I would look and see what they paid attention to if I gave them one of their, like a book of their favorite story, or about a topic that they really liked. Like, were they looking at the pictures more? Were they looking at the, were they reading some of the words? Like, how were they handling that book, magazine, even on the computer? What, if it's on the screen, what part of the information do they look at first? Because that's probably what's going to be the most meaningful to them. Again, just because they can read and write doesn't necessarily mean that they look at the words first. So just that may be like a really easy informal assessment to do if you're not sure where to start. Length. So is it one thing at a time, two things at a time? Like, I need to show, this is how many you show, like you go over and then you take it away and then you put two more or one more. So it just depends. Technology based, again, it's the same thing, right? And a lot of times those programs will provide you with different options of how many you want to show at a time. And again, it's basically practice. So if they're just starting, then probably less is better. And then as they get used to the format and understand how the format of the schedule works and, how to be successful, then you can start increasing the number. Method of manipulating, meaning interacting. That's it. Do they have to carry it around? Does somebody else have to carry it around? Can you just place it somewhere where they can see it and you can point to it from a distance, like if you're in a room and they can look at it, but they don't need to carry it around, right? So the pictures maybe need to be larger. Do they need to mark it off? Do they need to cross it off to show that something is completed, or can they just leave it as is? Or do they need to, have those good old Velcro ones? And again, you can buy these in the store now. I see them all the time. Especially for younger kids, where they can just, pull it off, or on Amazon. Amazon has a lot. There's some really good ones now, where you can just pull them off and like with Velcro and put them in an envelope to show it's done. So what is going to be the most meaningful for the student to help them understand, okay, this is done. It's, the next activity is about to begin. So that will really help with transitions, help them understand what's expected, what they can expect, how to be successful. Location, I kind of talked about that in this last one. And then method of initiation and transition. So kind of said that too. But an important one is initiating for students with autism, for individuals with autism. It is sometimes challenging for them to initiate or start something, start the calendar, look at the calendar, ask about the calendar. So especially at the beginning, it may be a good idea for you to model how to use it, be very positive about it, reinforce, really talk it out, model the whole process, the whole thinking process behind it, until you see that the student picks it up and they start to initiate that. Because initiation is very hard if they're not 100% sure of how it works, what words they're supposed to use, all those little details that sometimes we don't think about are that important because we've done it so many times, especially with schedules. But for those, especially those beginning, or they're beginning a new one in a new setting, they may need that modeling before they're comfortable enough to, to independently start the schedule themselves. Okay, so I described some of the schedules, but here are just some pictures of what they may look like. So technology on the right, well, my right, so that may be your left. But you can see here's one of the apps, right, that can be used so very easily. So might be written down. The one at the very bottom is the object. And it's an object paired with a picture. So it looks like they're working towards having a picture schedule, possibly a non-reader. And so it's, they're transitioning so that, because the only thing about an object one is, right, it's not very easily transportable outside of an environment. And you have to have all those pieces for it to make sense. So pictures are a lot easier to carry around. And the student may not go to the symbol, they may go to the photograph of what that represents. So in the bottom example, they went straight to symbol. So they must maybe they use symbols for something else, like for cues, or so they know the student understands that, but it may not be symbols. It may be photographs. That may be a better choice for your child. You can see here some more complicated, the more typical picture schedules that we think of. I would not put times on the left. I mean, if you know that those activities start at that time every single day, then great. But I have found through experience that when you put times on the schedule, if it doesn't start right at that time and they can tell time on the clock, yeah, then you may have another type of challenging behavior because, the schedule says that's what's going to happen. So you can teach that flexibility, but when you're first starting, I really recommend not to use times, just use the order. I would just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just the order of it may happen, not so much the time, just because, things happen. Okay, let's see. Yes, we have a few more. So like I said, it could be a to-do list. You see at the top left corner, that looks like they're really trying to reinforce, provide a preferred activity to get through some other activities that they may not want to. It looks at the bottom left is technology. So that's an app there on an iPad of a schedule. They're showing a visual schedule for school, showing how, you can show change. And then here's just for a child who has multiple classes. It looks like it's in a notebook. So it's more of a visual cue schedule where they're just looking and they're reminding, every day is a different schedule, especially in middle school and high school. So that just reminds them what that schedule of that day is going to be. And if there's any changes, the teacher can put that in there. And then on the bottom right, you can see that's a really, really, for an academic setting, read. And then on the right side is the reinforcement, obviously. So after they read, they get gummy bears, color, they get goldfish, they cut something out, they get M&M. So again, the idea is to fade those reinforcements, and those are what we call primary reinforcements, the food, the favorite food. Some kids need to start there, especially if they haven't used reinforcement in this form for, ever. This basically pairs something really preferred, something they really want, with something that they may not want to do. But the idea is just to teach that, when you do something that may not be preferred, you do get something that you do prefer. And it builds that confidence and that trust in the format and the system. And so the idea is to then, slowly fade those gummy bears and goldfish and M&Ms out until maybe after the cut, or after more activities, or maybe not at all. Maybe it's more of a privilege, different types of reinforcement. So that looks like a child that may be young or just starting with that type of format. Okay, so hopefully that gave you some ideas. And now the question is how do you do it? Well, we started talking about the planning stage, right? So let's talk more let's use that information and build upon it. Okay, so first you're going to decide what information needs to be bridged, because you're not providing a visual support for everything. So what is it that is, being repeated, asked about, that they don't seem to understand when you say it with just words, that they're, times a day that they're just exhausted at the end, it's just challenging times of the day. Challenging times of the day for many different reasons. For me, when in doubt, and I've tried everything else, I create visual supports, because you can always take them away, right? And it may be days that you don't need visual supports every day for the same thing. It may, they can't, when they wake up, or if they never went to sleep, it's going to be a challenging day, or it's going to be a challenging morning until they take that first nap, or whatever the case may be. So that's when you bring out your folder of visual supports and use those, because it's going to be the child's going to have a challenging time with auditory processing and remembering what to do and being able to verbalize questions or initiate things. So that's where your visual supports are going to come in handy, and also and reduce the anxiety and frustration that they feel and, gives them confidence that they're going to be successful, even though they're not feeling themselves, and they're having, and they're feeling a little bit tired or slow or sick. The visual supports will help them get through those times. So the next question is, what format do you need? So a lot of times with visual supports, you have a visual support toolkit. Yeah, you have a lot of different visual supports ready to use, or tools like sticky notes, just pens, notepads, a whiteboard, little whiteboard, little toolkit, technology apps on an iPad or your phone, that can, be used for visual supports, that are already ready, right? You have this, I've seen some people just even have like a small backpack with it that they can carry with them when they know they're probably going to need something. With reinforcements in there, those primary reinforced choice boards, a lot of those little things that we've talked about already today. They have those all in those backpacks, so that in case they need it, they can pull it out pretty quickly. So boundaries, boundaries, that's something you can use in the environment, a cue card, or a schedule. Choose which visual is going to represent. This is something that you probably already will have established. Objects, photos, symbols, words. Decide whether it needs to be stationary, portable. Again, you'll have this decided as well. If you're doing it for challenging times, it probably a lot of times will be portable. In the classroom, a big thing I've seen a lot of teachers start to use, and therapists, are putting something on a lanyard, like even a small communication support or a schedule or cue cards that go around a lanyard, so they can just pull it out quickly, put it on, and then they can show the card of the student of what the expectation is or what they're supposed to be doing right now. So that might be something helpful for you in different settings. So if you forget that backpack, or it's just really, another thing to carry, then if you have visual cue cards on a lanyard that you can just put around your neck, or I've seen it on a wrist, with those spiral, the name's escaping me right now, but like a spiral bracelet where they have cue cards attached to them. On their keys, they have cue cards on their keys. And so if the child needs that cue, they can just quickly show the card. Again, could be a photograph, could be a picture, could be a symbol. And then the child knows, oh, okay, that's what I need to be doing right now. Oh, that's what we're doing next. Okay, so there's a lot of different, how will the student interact with it? So remember, I told you it's not a visual support, so let the child interacting with it. So are they writing on it? Are they creating it? Do they need to point to it? Are you pointing to it? For some students, that may just be mean they're just looking at it, just the fact that you see that they're looking at it. Then that's maybe the interaction in itself. And then of course you have to think about how you're going to model and reinforce it. Remember, you're modeling it all the time. Even if they've already used it before, model it anyway. Okay, it can't hurt. But don't use too many words. A lot, if it is something that where they're anxious, frustrated, they're having a bad day, less words are better. So just say it one time, do not repeat it. Just say it one time and just point to it. Show it to them. If they need to hold it, some kids need to hold the visual supports, especially if they're supposed to be walking to a place. Holding like a picture of where they're supposed to end up at helps them a lot, because they can stay focused on it and it keeps their hands busy. Okay, so again, lots of different ways to use visual supports. Ask their teachers, ask their therapists, any other specialists that you notice use a lot of visual supports in their settings, and ask them, how to best use them for home purposes and community purposes. All right, so I do need to call this out though. There is such thing as too many visual supports in an environment. And then that turns into visual noise, okay? So this classroom is very pretty, okay? It seems very joyful, bright colors, lots of things going on. I mean, you can see there's definitely visual supports in the sense of organization, some boundaries, some cue cards. Don't see a schedule, but maybe, we can't see the whole classroom. There's a lot going on. It may be really cool to have those big bubbles or on the ceiling, those and it looks pretty, and those flags on the windows. But for some students that may not bother them, okay? But you have students who need visual supports throughout the day, who are easily distracted, who can get overwhelmed with the environment. If you have those type of students, and I'm using students because this is a classroom setting, but this could apply to other settings. If you have children who meet any of those criteria, then this is causing may be a very challenging environment, okay? Because there's a lot of input that can be very distracting. They may not know where to look for what information to understand how to be successful. I like that she has the classroom rules down at the bottom, probably that's carpet area. But there's so many other things going on that a child may be overwhelmed, and then that's when visual supports may not be helpful. So what I recommend for sure, but research does too, but just from practical being there, is if a student is in an environment at home, and there's having challenges following through or hearing what you're saying, look around and see if just the environment is very overwhelming input wise. And if you can put away what's not important for them to have access to, that will help them a lot to be more independent and be able to really focus on the information that you want them to focus on. Okay, so visual supports are great. Visual decorations are fun, but they can take away if they're not, either if they're decorations, they may be taking away as just too much input. If they're visual supports, but they're not being used because they don't need it anymore, something that, they did last year or something, then just put it away. Put it away. Okay. You can always take it out, not saying throw it away, just put it away until it's needed. Okay, so just to kind of wrap up a little bit, we're just getting to the end. Tips for using visual supports: it must be accessible. Okay, make sure that they can see it. Don't put it up high on the wall. Let me go back to this picture. A lot of classrooms have that alphabet way up there. Okay, if the teacher can interact with it up there, great. Okay, and if she's doing it on a regular basis and she shows the kids how to use those letters up there, awesome. But if she's not, and it's just up there and nobody interacts with it, and the kids really don't think about looking up there, and they're still, struggling with, how to draw P or Q. I'm not sure what, classroom this is, but then take those down. They have name cards on here. I see a lot of schools now that have name cards, and they have the alphabet right on there. Great, right in front of them, very accessible, can be modeled by you, by the teacher, by the other students. Same thing at home, okay? If there's any, what are the sequence of when you get up in the morning and get ready for school or get ready for something, and you have a to-do list or a schedule, put it right where the student can very easily see it. If they're crossing it off, just provide that marker, use contact paper, ask the school to laminate for you, whatever you need to do, but make it accessible so they can see it. They can go back to it anytime. Portable is great. Use a lanyard, a key visual cues so they can find it. What we find is that in the schools, when students know that the teachers always have visual supports with them, like on the lanyard or on the bracelet or on their keys, if they have to carry their keys, when they have those visual cues sticking out of their pockets, the kids will come right up to them and try to find the picture and use it as a communication support. Because again, even if a kid is verbal, sometimes it's really hard to remember what word to use to initiate something, to ask for help, to ask for something. And sometimes that may be why the challenging behavior is occurring, because they just can't remember what word to use, or what question to ask. So if the teacher, or if you as the guardian or parent have a visual cue with some of the statements that this child can use or can use to request things, then that will help them as well, and they'll rely on that. So again, remember, model, use it consistently whenever the student, during times when student need it the most. Remember that some visual supports are not fated because we use them too. So some of them are a life skill that you're teaching them. And if it is fated, please don't let it become visual noise and a distraction. Put it away. Just put it away until, again, it's needed again, or you can turn it into a different visual support. So now when I ask you this questions, does your child, and you see these clouds, which visual supports can you use to meet their needs? Oops. If they need to know what's next, my clouds used to be able to highlight. That's okay. But if they're always late, then, yes, having a schedule, just like for us, will help them a lot know when the expectation is. That's when you may want to put a clock on there. Visual timers are a great cue to help with time, like how long it should take them to brush their teeth, eat breakfast. I'm just thinking of things in the morning, because a lot of times kids are tardy for school because we just can't get them out the door, or doesn't even have to be school, whatever that event is. So using timers, letting them know that they need to finish by this certain time, just will help them with that lateness, because it's just, time is such an abstract thing, right? And it's maybe hard for them to understand how to use their time to accomplish tasks in time. It's an executive functioning skill. So really helping them with that through other types of cues. Need directions repeated over and over and again. This is where you pull out, out of your toolkit, your sticky notes, your whiteboard, and just write it down what the directions are. Or if you can plan a little bit, print them out and have them accessible and go over them, and then to leave it out for them to look at. Does not follow directions, kind of the same thing. So if they need directions repeated over and over, they can't remember it. If they don't follow directions, can't remember it. Okay, or they never heard it in the first place. So again, visual supports may not need it all the time, but when they do, especially with their first few times, that's usually when it is, because they're a little anxious because it's new and expectations are there. Meltdowns with transition, that'll be the schedule. Okay, and some cue cards. A lot of times kids will need some timers when that transition to the next activity will occur. Okay, you have 2 minutes left, you have 1 minute left. A little bell or a timer going off, that all will help. Easily fatigued or overwhelmed. If you start using visual supports more and more, you should find this less and less. Irritated by change, again, that will lessen that. Interrupts, it will become less, because the child will know how to ask you the question, and they know that you're going to provide the support. And always needs to know what's happening next. Again, schedule, reminder cue cards. If you can't show the schedule, a little cue card. Remember, we're going to the store next. Okay, remember, we're going to, you wrote it down on your sticky note or whiteboard, and they're crossing it off, and then you're just letting them know a few minutes, 2 minutes before. Remember, next thing we're going to do when the bell goes off, we're going to leave here and go to the store. So little things like that. I've seen for parents on the back of the child sitting in the back of a car, they have visual supports on the back seat. They just get felt. I should find a picture of that. A felt, and then they have good old Velcro, and they put the Velcro and they put that schedule in there. So the child's in a safety seat, they're looking at the schedule, and it's reminding them what's going to happen. And as the parents driving, they're talking about it, and what's going to happen next, who's going to be there, and they can put those kind of things on there. So Here are some resources. Again, this is going to be in that PDF that was at the beginning of this presentation that you could access through the bit.ly or the QR code. So the Affirm modules will go, those you can look at those for the evidence-based practices to learn more about them. There is information for parents or guardians for each of them. You can share them with the schools. That would be useful. Autism Internet modules. Those are great for families. There's a lot of different topics on there. So again, a great resource. Iris Center models, that's another great resource. Same thing, just a different agency. Autism Internet modules are out of Ohio. And then this last one is also great for resources, just for different questions and stuff like that. Well, thank you very much for watching this video. If you don't mind, please let us know how I did. This helps us with future presentations. Again, you can use that QR code with your phone and just fill out a really quick survey. You can use that bit.ly. If you do live in the state of Kentucky, or if you don't, you can always reach out to us. We'll connect you with whatever agency in your state may be able to help you answer your questions or be able to help you navigate the resources. But otherwise, feel free to come visit us. We usually provide resources that can be used anywhere. Doesn't have to be the state of Kentucky. But again, we have that too. We'll direct you to the resource that you need, and that can help answer your questions. All right, well, thank you so much and take care. Bye.